កម្មវិធីកិច្ចសន្ទនាកម្ពុជានិងពិភពលោក
Good evening, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to Cambodia Global Dialogue of Southeast Asia TV. If you follow my show for the last several months, you probably spot a certain pattern. A lot of focus on young entrepreneur, a lot of focus on science, technology, innovation, that sort of thing. But tonight, I'm going to shift a bit to something, different. Something that I personally I like it, law. But more in the context of Cambodia in the ASEAN economic community. And I have the pleasure to have a good friend and a colleague, Hanim, and I will let her, introduce herself later. But we're going to talk about the evolution, the dynamic evolution of the legal profession, of the legal community in ASEAN, and how is it linked, related, influenced by the global evolution. Of course, I have Machu, who appeared, I think, a year ago in a show. I mean, people forget your face already. So that gave an opportunity for me to ask you to introduce yourself a bit, and then Hanim.
Siphana, thank you. Yeah, last time I was on the show was about a year ago, sitting in this chair talking again about the law through Southeast Asia. I've been, just as a recap, I've been in Cambodia for 22 years now, working in the legal sector, originally in the development sector, teaching law. We used to work together way back then, developing laws, teaching law, legal development work, and then about 10 years ago switched over to the private sector, so working in law firms and primarily assisting investors into Cambodia, both domestic investors and foreign investors. Now, of course, working together at Siphana and Associates for the last 5 years. So that's that in a nutshell.
Hani, my friend?
Well, good evening. It's a pleasure to be invited. Thank you very much. I have been a lawyer now for over 20 years, working in private sector in a law firm. I'm an ASEAN citizen because I've worked in 3 out of 10 ASEAN countries. I've practiced law in Malaysia, I've practiced law in Indonesia, and now I'm in Singapore. I'm a Malaysian by citizen, but have worked, apart from the 3 ASEAN, I've also worked in the UK and Japan. So 5 years, 5 jurisdictions, 20 years of legal experience, working for the private sector, different variety of projects. Corporate M&A, mergers and acquisitions, banking and finance, generally in the corporate field, corporate projects.
Yes.
So happy to be here.
Yeah, okay. Well, what you recently moved to Singapore, right? From Indonesia. What's your current portfolio now?
Well, I manage an independent legal network called Zico Law. So we are the first ASEAN, all 10 ASEAN law firm network. We have offices in all of the 10 ASEAN states. And within that 10 countries, we have 17 offices. Because Vietnam, for example, we have 2 offices in Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh. In Malaysia, there's 7 offices across East and West. So we're truly ASEAN law firm. And being in Singapore, it's a perfect hub for ASEAN to travel across to the different countries.
So in total, Zico, how many lawyers?
We have 300 lawyers across 10 countries in ASEAN. So
covering all spectrum of legal practice.
And they're all local lawyers, and each of the offices is managed by strong local managing partners.
Good.
So it's about promoting ASEAN talent. It's an ASEAN brand for the ASEAN people.
Yes. Yeah. Well, now we're in the ASEAN economic community, right? And the world is so interlinked now. What do you see the dynamics now shaping our region? Of course, there's a lot of investment coming in. There's a lot of trade. We are, I would say now, in terms of trade investment with the European Union, with China, with Japan, with the US, it's a lot of economic transaction. How do you see the legal profession in the region, shaping up to really be at the service of this massive economic cross-border transaction?
Well, it's an exciting and interesting time for lawyers. If you're a young lawyer today, you have the exposure to very exciting projects and documentation and deals. So you work alongside, you have foreign lawyers, there's foreign firms across a few cities like Singapore and Bangkok. So you get to learn and intellectually, debate with them in terms of negotiation skills. And you have exposure to large ticket deals. So in the past, a lawyer may be known to do conveyancing, simple sale and purchase of land or simple litigation agreements. And with the development of ASEAN, of foreign investment coming into ASEAN, you have the kind of ability to work in, say, project financing to build an airport or big toll road or bond issuance or IPO, so there's a lot more exciting transactions for the lawyer.
Matt, what do you see in the Cambodian context? I mean, of course, you also wear another hat, which is the CAMFIBA, right? The Employer Association of Employer, right?
Yeah, no, actually, it's similar to what Hanim was saying. I think, I look at it from a purely Cambodian perspective. I've been here for 23 years, which is almost my entire life, and so I can only sort of see it from the Cambodian perspective. What's happened is the sophistication of the requirements now has raised enormously. So what's expected of a young Cambodian lawyer, the product you're delivering is a much higher level than it was even 5 years ago. So there's a lot more rules in place now. The legal framework's been developed enormously in the last sort of 5-6 years. So as a result, the expectations placed on a Cambodian lawyer is raised enormously. So in the old days, take it back 10 years, we looked at the sort of contracts that were being drafted here. These were 2-page things. These were 2-page things. Now we're getting more foreign investment coming in. It's a much higher level of investment. Like Hanim was saying, that the infrastructure projects, the bigger projects, far more complex. So it's requiring a lot higher standard of product delivery. And it's happened now with the Cambodian investors as well. So before they were quite happy with the 1-2-page contract. Now they're the ones saying that we want this international standard because we're dealing with international partners. So the bar's raised enormously, and it's been raised very quickly. This has all happened in the last 5 years. So for a young lawyer now, the expectation on them compared to 5 years ago is much higher.
Well, how I see really the ASEAN Economic Community effect is, in fact, it push you to think beyond your border, right?
Yes.
And like you say, 10 years ago, a Malaysian would think I'm very comfortable with my Malaysian practice. There's enough client, the Cambodian think the same, the Thai gentleman or, lawyer think the same. But now not true, because all this cross-border transaction, suddenly you find yourself, oh my God, I don't know what's the other side of the border. And vice versa. I think by default it's pushing you, right? But I think it's more than anything is the demand from the client themselves, because they're talking about protection of their investment. You're crossing the border to an unknown territory. What's the best thing you need to have? Protection. What's your take on that?
I mean, absolutely. And then we go back to education of legal.
Okay. Yes.
I ask you this: is ASEAN ready to bring up this kind of talent that are able and have the necessary skills and tools equipped to protect their clients' interests? So this is something that I think ASEAN governments, need to up the game. I mean, in the past, as Zico, as a law firm, we've hired lawyers from the UK, Australia, but mainly overseas or Europe.
Yes.
That's come back to ASEAN because we feel that the education level, when you go overseas and come back, it's a lot more mature. But I think, there should be, a lot more push to bring up the level of the law schools in ASEAN, and why our lawyers studying common law, or even why not studying more on ASEAN law? I mean, there should be something that I know some of the universities have this program now, but I think having learn more about the laws in our areas.
We were together at this ASEAN EU International Day Symposium, where we talk about the difference between Europe and ASEAN. Europe being very homogeneous, ASEAN being very heterogeneous, and what you just said is exactly that case. Some of us study, common law because historically the country was under colonial days, right? And Cambodia was a civil law Malaysia is common law. But at some point, you're right, ASEAN have to start thinking, we have to move beyond this colonial legacy. We have to start harmonizing, perhaps is a big word.
Creating an ASEAN identity.
Yes,
I think
yes.
your ASEAN laws that work for ASEAN.
Yes.
I mean, yes, you have international standards for certain stuff, but I think, pushing the ASEAN talent a bit more, I think that would be good.
Yeah, but from the educational side, right? I mean, don't you think it's a bit hard for ASEAN being such a diverse economy, diverse country, diverse language, background? You think it's realizable?
Well, I think there are certain things that can be harmonized, the larger ticket items.
Give me some example.
Okay, for example, a dispute resolution mechanism.
Okay.
I think why people come to ASEAN, difficulty for investing sometimes, how can my contract be enforced? Is it going to be binding? Am I, if I go to court against a certain family or a certain group, I will definitely lose because it's about deeper pockets.
Yes.
It's about the the sophistication of the court system. All this I guess questions about ASEAN's readiness for a robust dispute resolution. Right. So if more ASEAN states come together and establish, say, an ASEAN arbitration that everybody will recognize.
Yes. Take a short break and then we'll come back. Matthew, I want you to share a bit, what's happening in the so-called commercial arbitration in Cambodia. Matt, commercial arbitration, where are we now? I mean, I know it was born, but to me it's like wine bottled in 2015 or something like this. Right?
Not like everybody else, we're kind of waiting to see the first. I actually read recently they've just had the first two cases resolved. I think they were settled by the reports in the media. One involved the government, which was interesting. So I think their first case at the Commercial Arbitration Centre involved a government, a private party, and two foreign parties. But they've both now been settled and decided by the Arbitration Council. So now it's underway. We had it through the labour, of course. So Cambodia's got some experience in arbitrating disputes, and a very robust, very successful labour arbitration council, which I was
very respected.
Yeah, I was one of the first arbitrators on that way back 10 years ago. But now it's purely Cambodian. It resolves labour disputes, which is probably our biggest issue, given that the garment sector is our biggest pillar of GDP here. But so there's been a lot of experience to be had through the Labour Arbitration Council. So now, but always during that time, that was always a question we got from clients was, how can we resolve our disputes in Cambodia? The courts are still, evolving.
Yes.
And so they needed a much more efficient way to resolve disputes. There was nothing here. They looked at the Arbitration Council for Labour and saw it can be done. And we were always sending people offshore before the arbitration clause, and pretty much every time Singapore or Hong Kong, primarily Singapore, so nearly every foreign investor would opt to have offshore arbitration. But now the facility's here. Like you said, it was set up 3-4 years ago. It's only just really started to take and resolve cases this year. So we're all waiting now to see how that plays out. It's got foreign involvement. You need to give comfort to the foreign investors. So you have to have those foreign involvement. They see that gives them comfort to use the facility. So I think now that they've issued those two decisions, we'll now see just how many people opt to use the facility. My understanding is at the moment a lot of people are still opting to go offshore.
Yes.
But once I think they see the first 2 or 3 decisions come out of the Arbitration Council, then I think more people will opt to take it. Obviously, it's much more cost effective to do it here.
Yes.
The disputes are here, the parties are here, so it's a lot more cost effective to do it here. So I think now that it's showing that it's operational, I think this next 6 months or a year we'll see exactly.
Yeah, I was very honored to be invited and paid for, by the way. It's important to get paid by the World Bank to start the training of the first batch of the commercial arbitrator.
Right.
So 50 of them, I trained them, I think for 3 months or something. Yeah, it's quite on commercial law and everything. We have the Singapore arbitration, SIAC, who come to train on the actual rules of arbitration. I cover more on the commercial, the law side of it. But like you say, it's beginning to take shape. But Haniam, I want to turn to you more because you mentioned you have worked in a few jurisdictions, and the issue is that civil law, common law, there's a lot of I would say, perception of this, legal system, that sort of thing. Indonesia is a civil law country.
Yes, very similar.
Singapore is and Malaysia common law. So as a practitioner, what was your main frustration when you deal with say for example, you in Indonesia, you deal with a common law client. I mean, a client from a common law jurisdiction.
Okay,
and vice versa.
Educating the client, I was trained as a common law lawyer. I went to the UK. My studies were all common law, and I came back to Malaysia, worked as common law. Then I went to Japan. And
which is a civil law.
Yeah, civil law jurisdiction. So that first transition where you are trained in common law, where you're drafting the documents, the covenants, the warranties, they're very thick documents, to Japan where actually civil law agreements are a lot more simpler because it's a binding it's a law between the two parties, the contract itself, and then it's a matter of interpretation really, rather than common law. You have all the clauses already pre-agreed or put in to avoid any ambiguity. So that adjustment, I guess, as a young lawyer was also I guess striking for me to learn that. And then coming into Indonesia, it was easier because it's then from Japan civil law into Indonesia civil law. But we see, I think, with sophistication of deals, more and more documents, the common law types of clauses are coming into the civil law documents. So you have thicker requirements, you have more clarity, because as deals become more sophisticated, they need to have clauses to support them, so that it really stipulates what parties decide or agree.
Well, I'm like you, trained as a common law lawyer from US and then from Australia. Then I realized while I'm going through that motion, my country is, Cambodia is a civil law country before the war. Then we went through the genocide, there's no law. And then the socialism kicks in, in the early 90s, the UN came in, they bring a bunch of hotspot, right? Just whatever. After the peace process, every donor loves us. The American loves us. Well, here's our system. The French, hey, look, we used to be here. The Australian, the Singapore, everybody came, right? And pushing their own system. I think they meant well, to be fair to them. They meant well. They want to help. Except, they did not understand that when, so many systems come in together and the recipient are not in a position to actually figure out what it is good for them, certainly we just we lost. So the Japanese came and then reintroduced really the civil law system back, right? The French helped us on the criminal code, right? So I realized that as a practitioner, I'm dealing mostly with clients coming from a common law jurisdiction. So now I force myself, I have to go back to school. So now I'm going back to University of Paris, Pompeu Assas, to do another PhD, but on comparative law, right? And because you see, if you look at it, right, you mentioned that client come, right? You have to listen to the client. But the client say, look, we want to set up a sort of like a wealth management, right? For people who want to think of the generation, 2 generations from now, they want to set up a trust system. We in Cambodia, we don't have in the civil law, right? But then when you translate into Cambodian, it becomes something that they understand what it is, right? Yeah, it's good. I want to put the money so that my kid will not, after my death, will not have to divide my asset. But then, in terms of legal concept, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. I mean, I faced this frustration when I was coming back, when I was in Indonesia trying to do sukuk, Islamic finance.
Yes,
because
yes.
as securitization transactions require the separation of legal and beneficial interests. And of course, the common law jurisdictions allows for that because you have this, you can separate the two title, whereas civil law, no, the title is a legal title.
Yes.
So in order for it to be inefficient, because Islamic finance requires a lot of buy and sell, and every time you buy and sell or trade, tax gets imposed.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's not an actual trade, if you're a common law jurisdiction, you just extract the different rights. It's not it doesn't attract tax.
Yes.
So it becomes efficient. So that was one of the impediments of why at that point of time sukuk was difficult because you cannot structure it properly. But because of market and client and the
legal innovation.
Yes, you do. You find ways around in order to accommodate the limitations.
And how would you do that in a sukuk?
Of the system. Well, the government of Indonesia released a law. I mean, passed a law to allow for government sukuk, where you don't have to have the separation of title. You allow for a different vehicle to hold it on behalf of the beneficiary, the note holders. So it was allowed in certain circumstances. Of course, it was only the criticism was a government sukuk only, but not corporate sukuk. But then lawyers will have to think, okay, let us think about certain types of assets that you don't need to transfer title. For example, receivables, or so there are different classes of assets where this does not trigger the title. So we then find ways, or like Garuda did a very good sukuk which is based on the sales of seats, the tickets, rather than hard asset planes or airports. So do you think of a way of how do you extract value from the particular instrument? Then you don't attract the buy and sell element. Yeah.
Matthew, being here some 20 some years in the legal profession here, I think Cambodia, because our legal system started pretty much from scratch, really. We went through this idiosyncratic development, which is more in response to the growth of the economy. The real estate, for example, from a command economy where title is not recognized to a free market where title is private title is recognized. How do you see this evolution? Because again, from a civil law perspective, this beneficial right, it's how do you see that in real estate, for example?
Which is the classic example here.
Yes.
Because when we first arrived, like I said way back then, there wasn't that much legal framework in place. And we had consultants come, as you said, from different countries and start to, on a piecemeal basis, put in place individual regulations. There was no coherent body of law. And they were all sort of acting separately to each other as well. And I think, like you mentioned, the land law is the classic example, because we had a situation where a land law was put in place. There was trading of land. There was actually no legal basis for trading of land through the 90s. You couldn't own land legally, yet people were buying and selling land. Considering it to be ownership, it really wasn't. So in 2001, we had to put in place a land law that basically accommodated the fact that people now can own land. But then we had Japan come along and put the civil code, which had a whole different system of land registration. We have the land law, which is Torrens title, 2001. The Japanese come with a recordation system. And so it's the two things conflicting. So it's evolved, like you say, based upon the needs of society at any given point in time. I think one of the listening to the conversation, and having taught here for many years, I think the one subject I think now really we should be teaching is legal systems. Now, when we got legal systems, we were thinking civil law versus I'm thinking for Cambodian students, ASEAN students, the different systems of the different countries. Because none of them it doesn't really matter whether you're civil law or common law. It's what are your laws?
Exactly.
Right? What is the law about land ownership? What is the law about? And so when we get clients coming now, there's so much intra-ASEAN trade now. So a lot of our clients are from ASEAN countries. So there's people trade, and they come with an understanding of the law from their country. So they're trying to understand Cambodian law in that context. So our lawyers now need to understand where they're coming from. And trust was a great example.
Yes.
Because trusts do exist. Our clients understand it. It doesn't exist in Cambodia. However, there are ways we can achieve that same end by using Cambodian law, but we need to understand the concepts they're coming from. So I think law students now within ASEAN, because there's so much intra-ASEAN trade, they really need to understand the rules of the other 10 ASEAN countries. So when we're getting clients from those countries, we can understand where they're coming from, what their understanding is, and then see exactly how that fits in a Cambodian context. The problem is right now, our lawyers don't understand their understanding, so there's this real mismatch and it leads to frustration. And we don't know what laws we don't have in a sense,
Yes.
you know, so that's really the needy thing, is this legal systems understanding, you know, throughout ASEAN. You know.
Thanks, Matt. One last break. When we come back, I want to project ourselves more into the future. The disruption, the fourth industrial revolution, the IT, the Alibaba of the world, how it is shaking this legal profession, you know. Well, Matthew, Hanim, we don't look that old, okay? So, but what I'm saying, in the short span of our life, we have seen a exponential, you know, growth of digitization of technology. You know, when we went to school, when we went to university, computer barely exists. Now it's everywhere. Now it's overtaking, you know, the robotic and that sort of thing. You know, you go to a car manufacturing, right, in Japan or in Korea or in China, you expect in your mind, right, you think maybe there are 1,000 people lining up. Occasionally you bump to a guy, you know, with this computer there, and the rest all machine, right? And you would think that maybe this technology will only apply for people in the science, in the engineering, in the mechanical field. But long and behold, we are in the legal profession. They are invading into our space now. You are traveling around the region, and so is Matt. What do you see that disruptive force there? How do we deal with it? Should we be afraid of it?
No, we should embrace the changes. We should embrace innovation. Look at Kodak, you know, it didn't embrace innovation.
Who would have thought?
Yeah, exactly.
But Kodak did not evolve, no?
It did not. That's the point.
But Fuji did.
It's really grown.
Fuji did. Fuji have moved into cosmetic. Right? Anyway.
But with legal, I started by saying this is a very exciting time for young lawyers because there's just so much change out there in terms of how legal services are delivered. So what I tell my young lawyers at the firm is that if you do not innovate, if you do not use these tools to make your work easier, you know, then you will be left behind. Right now, the services of a lawyer is not only given by traditional ways, by a law firm, it's also given by online services. There are online providers. In Korea alone, there are 23 online websites. In Japan, Bengoshi.com in fact has IPO'd and you know and managed to raise millions of funds in order to grow their online legal services. You have Hong Kong and Singapore, where small family-owned businesses just pay $10,000, download 10 agreements, and then they can cut and paste. So they don't need to meet a lawyer.
An accounting firm.
And they do it, as well. So and of course, another one threat is coming from the accounting firm. They are providing legal services. So we have competition coming from all angles. That's one part. The competition is very heated, and then we also have the way legal services are delivered are different. So people like us who own and run law firms, partners need to think about innovative ways. We need to invest in technology.
Yes.
We need to embrace technology. Sometimes you can't invest it on your own. Then you need to work with universities or research houses or software providers to deliver better services. Yeah.
No, I think technology depends whose perspective you look at it from. There's the lawyer, there's the law firm. For the lawyer, it's great. I mean, Hanem and I were just in Sydney at the IBA a couple of weeks ago, where there was a presentation from one of the tech companies on the new software they've got to review and analyze contracts. So you can just put in a 70-page contract, doesn't matter if it's upside down this way, it'll take that, it'll OCR it, it'll spit out a report saying exactly what the dispute resolution clause is, exactly what the caveat clause is, you can ask it. So how good is that for a lawyer? I mean, you're having to read through 70 pages. So from a lawyer, like say, embrace it, it's great. From a law firm, of course, I can say, this means other people can deliver the service. So it's a kind of a threat to law firms if they don't embrace.
It's great for lawyer, but it's a threat for the employer.
So from a business perspective, but from the lawyers, absolutely. I mean, and more and more. And of course, the speed at which this innovation evolves. I mean, this is just now. Can you imagine in 2 years from now?
Yes.
Things we haven't even thought of will be in place. And if you don't embrace them, you're certainly going to be Kodak, before you know it. So absolutely. So it's good for the lawyer. law firms have to think about it. They've got to make sure, because there are other service providers now that can do what we do, and very quickly, very efficiently, very cheap.
And this is where I think that if we embrace it, as you said, combine your idea and your idea, Matt, is that certainly we could have the 10 ASEAN law that we are not comfortable or unfamiliar with the other 9.
That's right.
Certainly that technology can give us a head start to say, hey, by the way, your clause here in Malaysia, you have some issue here because, it's
Very
like
good
that,
point.
right?
That's right.
That's a very good point. Any other thought on disruptive
No, I
trend?
think at the end of the day, you need to be very good at what you do. As long as you're good at what you do, the robots or the artificial intelligence will not be able to,
Yes.
kind of replicate something. I think they in the US there's the Ross, which is the first lawyer robot, and they put this curtain behind the Ross, and the individual asks the questions. Ross can answer, but beyond a certain niche, it's still the lawyering human part.
Yeah, the human
connection.
part of it. Yeah.
So this is the future of work question. Every sector has this now. So what is the future of work, and to what point are humans going to be replaced by technology exactly? There are certain areas where obviously you'd assume it can't happen, but you do need that human touch, and that's largely, the clients need comfort.
Yes.
I think they want to see a human being and they be comfortable that, okay, that technology's doing it, but you tell me that technology's done it well. They still need the human, the lawyer, to give them that confidence that whatever the machine's done is done correctly. So.
Honey, from the ASEAN perspective again, I keep going back to the ASEAN because I believe the ASEAN community, not just the economic community, I believe in the ASEAN community, which is, you have the political security pillar, which is, one, you have in the middle the economic pillar, and then you have the other one, which is the social culture pillar. But as a whole, as a community, ASEAN community, are you optimistic that maybe not in the short term, but maybe in the medium term, we could see some sort of legal harmonization in different fields that affect our life, that affect our economic transaction, that affect our legal system, our court system? What is your
I think
view
that
on
there
that?
are some things to have uniformity is good, but some things we need to champion our diversity. That's very
okay.
important as well, to be dynamic. If you're too homogeneous,
Yes.
I think.
Well, that's why ASEAN, we always have a motto. Diversity is always somewhere. Unity in diversity, whatever. But diversity word is always somewhere there.
So it's striking the balance between how different can you be and how alike you should become is an art by itself. And I think that's one of the challenges of ASEAN as it moves forward. If you can grapple and conquer that, have a very good balance, then you will succeed.
Man?
Absolutely, each country needs to retain its own. But where you need harmonisation, where there is cross-border movement, we need harmonisation. I mean, I look at it, in my role as CAMFIBA, we do the migrant labour issue. We're heavily involved in the migrant labour issues. This is Cambodians going to work in Malaysia, Thais going to work in overseas, etc. So where the problem with that is that different laws are preventing that easy movement of people. And so you've got a factory in Malaysia that wants the Cambodian workers and they're the ideal fit, but getting them there because of the different visa laws, because of the different work permit laws. We need harmonisation where there's cross-border movement, whether that's trade or people. But you certainly want to keep the identities, though, the
Yes,
individual countries.
indeed.
So,
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, this one of the very strong characteristic of this century is basically the globalization trend, where you start to see many law. IP is a good example where you can harmonize this sort of thing, And what else we can think of, but I do agree.
Capital markets, I think stock exchange, to raise financing. If we have one ASEAN capital market where we pool, all the ASEAN companies can go and raise financing, they'll be a lot more powerful than the different capital markets, stock exchange competing with each other.
Yes. Yeah, but this is where the area of harmonization kicks in.
Yeah.
In terms of having to deal with a one structure, that will apply for the 10 ASEAN country. But I do agree that diversity matter, our ASEAN way matter, our way to do things matter. I mean, you're dealing with three different culture. You have Buddhism, you have Christianity, you have Muslim. And sukuk is a product of of that cultural tradition. We are the product of a French protectorate colonialism, and so it's. I'm not saying which system is better or which system is not as good, because it does work in their own respective country. But the point is how, when that legal transplantation take place, how does the adjustment, right? How does the country, the recipient, is like a donor organ transplant, right? Versus the mechanical, when you change the carburetor of a car, for example, right? The car may not run smoothly, but in a human being, the host could die. You see, so I mean, I like to compare this legal transplant from that perspective. How do we ensure that it's transplanted, but that it can be adjusted, and how can the host at some point will just internalize it and make it his or hers, right?
Let me ask you this, and we just came from the ASEAN EU conference. Do you think ASEAN should strive to be like EU?
No way.
To be a
No
more,
way.
one currency and
No
one legal.
No way.
Yeah.
It's
not something that is say in 20 years.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think the difference of ASEAN and EU is so different that I don't think our leader aspire to go that route.
What about
anyway.
the criticism then we're just all signing agreements, but then they don't get implemented locally, they don't go anywhere, the budget is not enough? Then how, without a more binding rule of law or binding cohesiveness, can ASEAN move forward?
I'm not saying that they are not doing that, but they are doing at their own pace. Ultimately, a lot of issues that the EU have raised, we will implement it, but Indonesia will find its way to implement their national law to reflect their local reality. The Cambodian will do the same thing, but at some point it will merge, but the Cambodian way, the ASEAN way.
Where everybody's ready and prepared.
Yes,
yeah.
and don't forget the power of the private sector, because every economy aspire to be a great economy, to catch up. And how can you do that without having the FDI coming in?
Yes.
And this is where the role of the private sector kicks in. I want transparency. When
You
we
want good
negotiate,
lawyers.
when we
Back to
negotiate
legal.
the WTO, one of the core demand, I expect something more. But I say no. For us, we want transparency. We want predictability. Publish all your law, right? Oh, but we can only do in Khmer. Don't worry, publish your law in Khmer. We'll find a translator to translate in English or French, right? So I think the private sector is the one who's gonna push ASEAN to be responsive to their need. So again, not like we are gonna run to have this rule of law, in place like the EU, very formalistic. But again, we should stick with our way, with the ASEAN way. All right?
Indeed.
Good. Well, Hanim,
Thank you very much.
thank you so much.
It's always a
Matthew.
pleasure.
Yes.
All right. So I'm not going to bother summarizing. I think, again, like I say, the subject is so broad, so deep, so interesting that I guess the audience just had to enjoy it, Good night.